Welcome to Upper Pylon 2. Our mission is to provide you with an in-depth review of every episode of DS9 in the order they were broadcast. Tonight's episode is The Ascent, and this is Matt in Buffalo.
This is Chris in South Carolina.
And this is Matt from Arizona, and you are cleared for docking. We have a fun episode this week with The Ascent, so let's get right into it. Synopsis. Odo and Quark are trapped together while Nog and Jake rehash a previous episode. This is the ninth episode of Season 5, first aired November 25th, 1996, written by Ira Stephen Mayer and Robert Hewitt Wolf, and it was directed by Alan Croker. We only have two guest stars this week, Max Granchik as Rom and Aaron Eisenberg as Nog. Matt has the notes this week, so Matt, whenever you're ready to take us into The Ascent.
Teaser. We jump right into the Cisco's quarters, where Jake is moving out of the nest and into different quarters. Ben isn't too happy that Jake is actually moving much further away on the station still than he originally thought. Turns out, Nog is back on the station, or will be shortly, and Jake is moving in together with him. And there's a nice bit of continuity here where Ben points out that there was a time where he didn't even want Jake talking to him. And then we check in on the other half of the fathers in this equation. Rom is helping to set up the quarters when Quark drops by and drops off a nice shipment of root beer to welcome the kid home. Then Odo just pops on over and is overjoyed with the opportunity to take Quark into custody and to take him away. Quark is removed, and Odo and Quark are on a journey, an 8-day trip, to go meet a grand jury. Cue opening credits.
I kind of like the tone that sets up for this episode. It sets up that we're going to have something maybe kind of a little serious with the grand jury stuff, but because it's Quark and Odo taking a road trip, we know there's going to be comedy in there somewhere.
Taking a road trip. I love that allusion there. That's exactly what this is.
That's what this is. And like after watching this episode, I would pay big money to see Quark and Odo in like a remake of National Lampoon's Vacation.
Yeah, it's got to be better than that Vacation trash they put out a couple years ago.
Or Vegas Vacation.
No, Vegas Vacation was better than the remake.
Yeah.
It's still pretty bad. I didn't see the remake, but Vegas is awful.
But wouldn't you pay for something like that to see them in that kind of situation? Because that would be fantastic. I could watch a whole episode of just that.
Because we tried on for size them doing a remake of Alive, and it was pretty good. So why don't we have them do a remake of other genre flicks? When the episode sets up that, okay, the A storyline is just going to be Quark and Odo together, they are our UP MVP dream team, basically, put together for the whole episode. How is that not going to be funny and just good? The plot could be crap, but these two guys, just on their chemistry alone, is going to lift the episode.
Yeah, and I don't know that Quark has ever had a bad episode. You guys probably would disagree with me on that, but I feel like every time Quark's in a starring role or in any kind of role,
I didn't like that. Matt and I didn't like that episode with the Cardassian lover that came back to the station.
I love that one, but Odo has only put in one bad performance his entire time, so there's no arguing that these two together is just going to be fantastic.
Yeah, but even if Quark, it's a bad episode. Like I mentioned, it's like his chemistry or what he is by himself on the screen. If the episode's bad, he still has nasty little jokes at people's expense, or just his demeanor on everything is a major redeeming quality.
Yeah.
The same can't necessarily be said for Odo if he's in a bad episode, because his overall character isn't as magnetic and scene stealing necessarily, that's fine. That's just his character. But you could put them both in a bad episode. Quark will help it a lot more than Odo by himself.
Agreed. And you know what also would helps this episode is that we were discussing before the show that this episode's written by Robert Hewitt Wolf and Ira Stephen Mayer, and it turns out we did a little digging, and it turns out that Ira Stephen Mayer, at least, because Robert Hewitt Wolf, I believe, leaves the show in season 5, But Ira Stephen Bear has a hand in both the monumental episodes, shall we say, and all the comedy episodes. So the fact that we're getting Quark and Odo on a road trip together as written or co-written by Ira Stephen Bear means that at the very least we're going to get some dynamite dialogue.
Yeah, and you see that same thing when you have shows with a lot of teams of writers. The Simpsons talk about it all the time. Certain writers gravitate to certain characters and just have their voice like down pat and know exactly how to put it on screen. And Ira Stephen Bear, I think, clearly knows how to write the Ferengi, the correct not TNG, the correct DS9 Ferengi, and he shows it every season with these little green men type episodes where he just knows how to speak their language perfectly. Well, speaking of language, why don't we get a taste of it here in our Act 1. As per regulations of UP2, let's check right in on Quark and Odo on their way to meet the grand jury. And this is a nice taste of what the true meat of this episode is in our first clip.
So, how much longer till we reach Infernal Prime?
Oh, I'd say 191 hours and 17 minutes, give or take a day.
In that case, we better find something to occupy our time. Care for a game of Fizbin?
I don't play cards.
I'll teach you. It's a very simple game.
Let me put it another way. I don't want to play cards, and even if I did, I wouldn't want to play with you.
Afraid you'd lose? You know, Odo, I used to think all your problems stemmed from the fact that you were a changeling, isolated from your own kind, forced to live among strangers who didn't understand you. You couldn't eat, you couldn't drink, you couldn't sleep, you couldn't make love. Was it any wonder you had such a bad disposition? And you're not a changeling anymore. You're one of us. Life is yours for the taking. All you have to do is reach out and grab it. But do you? No. Because solid or changeling, you're still a miserable, self-hating misanthrope. That's who you are. And that's who you will always be.
I'm still not playing cards with you.
Fine. Then we'll just sit here for a week in silence. What are you reading?
Nothing that would interest you.
Don't be so sure.
Quark, give me that.
What are you going to do, arrest me? He walked towards her. The wooden deck heaving to and fro beneath his booted feet. Her hands moved to the brooch at her throat. She unclasped it, and the cloak fell from her shoulders. Her wet skin glistening in the moonlight. Lightning flashed, and heaven's thunder roared in rhythm with the beating of their hearts.
All right, enough.
Odo, I take it all back. You're obviously a lot more complicated than I thought. If you like that kind of thing, I might be interested in selling you my first edition of Vulcan Love Slave.
This is work, not recreation. Books like this give me an insight into the criminal mind. It is a well-known fact that a high percentage of homicides are motivated by romantic obsession.
Well, no one gets killed in Vulcan Love Slave. But it's still a hell of a read.
Give it up, Quark. You can annoy me, bait me, question my very existence, but in the end, we both know I've won. Because when all is said and done, I'll be heading back to Deep Space Nine, and you'll be spending the rest of your life in a Federation penal colony.
I'm not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
Look, Odo, give me a chance. At least tell me what the charges are.
I'm afraid I can't do that. This is a high-security investigation. I'm not allowed to discuss the specifics with anyone. Now, you'll excuse me. I have some reading to do.
Oh, that's just delightful, isn't it?
Lots to love. Lots to love out of that clip right there. and it's such a great setup. And when you think about it, and on rewatch, it becomes even better.
Oh, the glee on Quark's part all through that whole scene, because he knows he sets up
Soda's got
Quark.
nothing.
He sets
So
him up
great.
again in there to show he knows nothing in there.
I mean, speaking of which, another thing I'd pay for, can we get Armin Shimmerman as Quark to read, like do an audiobook for like a trashy romance novel? Because that would be fantastic.
Oh yeah, and that's all that was.
body.
I mean, what was Picard's film noir series?
Dixon Hill?
That was not a Dixon Hill level story. That was just pure trashy romance novel crap.
Vulcan Love Slave gets mentioned a lot. I want to know what that's about. Like, I know
I think you know.
There's an ebook. There's an
Is there really?
out there from recently where Quark actually goes to find Vulcan Love Slave number 12 or something. And
Oh wait, is this a real?
No, it's legit. I read it. It's
Okay.
fantastic. It takes like an hour to read. It's hilarious. But he goes to this porn convention basically,
Yeah.
and he meets the girl who plays the Vulcan Love Slave. And anyway, it's hijinks and it's funny. I loved it, and it didn't take any time to read. I think that's actually where Dan and I got to know each other, because we both read it and we were on 10 Forward together, and he hated it, or maybe he didn't hate it, but like he didn't love it like I did. And so we were arguing, and he was like, you keep saying that it was cheap, and so I should just take it for what it is, but I didn't like it. And I'm like, well, it was funny and hilarious, and I enjoyed my whole hour, so why would I be mad at it? And he said, I enjoyed my hour too, but it was bad.
You pretty much know what you're gonna get.
Yeah, I was like,
Backstory.
Quark goes to a porn convention. I mean, you shouldn't be expecting like highbrow.
I don't think they
Star
use
Trek.
porn convention, but I mean, you get the idea. Vulcan Love Slave really is, but yeah.
And speaking of references to other canon, though, did you notice the
Oh.
little one in here, which was Fizbin,
Fizbin.
which I think is isn't that the game that Kirk and Spock made up in the Piece of the Action?
Right. So the idea is that actually caught on to some degree, and then lived its life and became a galaxy-wide game. All right. But hey, they wanted to do that episode for the Troubles and Tribulations instead. So they still got their reference to that gangster planet in here.
Right. They chose the right episode. I have to go back, but I was never that fond of Piece of the Action.
I enjoyed it.
Right.
I thought it was campy fun.
Well, they would have to do a different tone, because we made the argument while we're doing the Tribbles episode again, but they lovingly homaged the Tribbles episode in the DS9 thing. I got a feeling if they went back, they would be making fun of
Lampooning it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the tone would be different. And they made the right decision, because I don't need universe to make fun of the previous versions.
And you know what's also the right decision is having this kind of story come now. And what I mean by that is not just because of physical limitations, but also, having this story written while Odo is solid, because it wouldn't work any other point, right? So, but I also say that not just because of the predicament they find themselves in, but like I keep saying, I think that once Odo became solid, he's become even more snarkier than he was when he was a changeling.
Right, and they gave it enough distance out that he's not sulking necessarily over it anymore. He's taken his whatever level of acceptance. Like, I mean, he calls it out that it's a shame that he's not a changeling to get us out of this situation. But in here, we don't want him just, oh, woe is me-ing through the whole thing. That wouldn't be fun or interesting. So they gave it a nice amount of room to breathe. And now you're just thinking that he's going to be this way forever. It just is what it is. And now let's take advantage of it. So yeah, the timing's nice on that. So coming out of that clip, let's check back in on the station. And now the uber professional and uptight Nog arrives and reports to Ben Sisko for his field studies as a cadet on the station. And they talk about moving in with Jake, and Nog assures the captain that he'll look after him. Then the two roomies take a tour of their humble quarters. And suddenly it's the odd couple situation here.
That's
again.
exactly what I thought. Like, insert the odd couple theme.
Yep, but the twist is the characters are reversed. Nog is the one who wants to clean the place, and Jake is a slob. Surely hijinks will follow. Now, let's check back in on the runabout. Quark and his hilariously tuned ears lead them to a weird noise coming from the ship. They bicker some about it, They follow it and eventually discover that, yep, that is definitely a bomb. So I don't know how much we want to talk about the B storyline here. There is one phenomenal scene that comes out of it, and it has nothing to do with Nog and Jake. But this is, I called it out in the synopsis, is this not just a role reversal rehash of a previous episode?
Which episode was it? Refresh my memory.
I forget the specific episode, but Nog and Jake have the fight, and they end up being forced
Oh, the
together.
double date one.
Yeah, and then they're forced together in the
this isn't
holding
as
cell.
icky. This isn't as icky.
Right.
No,
That one, because
the double
Nog's
date one was icky.
Terrible.
This one's kind of like just the odd couple, and I mean, there's nothing terribly wrong with it. I just find it less like when we go back to that story. I always kind of want to go back to Odo and Quark.
I agree, but I think this is a great way to reintroduce Nog to the show. Like bring him back in, and like
it's a good way to show that he's a changed character now that he's
show
at least a year of Starfleet Academy, right?
And it's kind of, this doesn't take up that much of the episode, I don't feel like. And the later part of it, you kind of see where it connects to the other story to some extent.
And again, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying I'm a little less entertained when we're focusing on that than when we're on
I don't deny that. I don't deny that at all. Nothing reaches the levels of Quark reading sleazy romance and some of their banter back and forth, but I think that it's fine, and it gives a nice palate cleanser between those takes so that they don't all just run together.
Right. I mean, you're setting them behind the eight ball a little bit when you have them be storylining two characters that are the heavy lifters on the show. You never really want to stop watching them. But then when you give them what I'll describe as, it's nothing necessarily wrong, but it is absolutely a paint by numbers story. There's no real twist to it other than, oh, wow, Nog is now the uptight guy. Oh, ho, ho. And then it's like from there out, not much.
I will say it's paint by numbers, and that's fine. The only part of it I don't love all that much is I feel it's like it's wrapped up too quickly in the sense that Cisco orders them to get along, and then they get along.
Yeah, there is no resolution. It's just be nice. Okay, let's go have fun. It's not so good.
Yeah, what we don't see is the ensuing conversations and the continued uncomfortability, because we're never going to revisit this, right? Really, all this was to reintroduce Nog, show us where his character has come to and what he's going to be and how everybody kind of views him. So you see how Quark views him. It gives Quark kind of the impetus at the end of what he needs to do. So, like, I mean, it plays an integral part to the final moments of this story. So I'm okay with it.
It's fine.
It's thematically it works, and just nuts and bolts of writing the episode, you have to show that quite a lot of time is passing on this planet that they end up. I mean, they drop the hints, but it's days and days. So every time it cuts away, it's now a couple days later on that planet. So you just nuts and bolts need something to like show a passage of time.
And you know what? It's a story that, like, while it doesn't wow me, it doesn't. You know, I'm not getting angry. I'm not getting annoyed. So that's a plus.
Because I think it's good character work. You're right. It's a paint by the number story, but you're growing the characters through it. So I mean,
we'll get to it. But I was on the edge of getting annoyed, and then you get the Rom talking to Cisco scene.
That comes at the right time.
That's all you needed from that entire storyline. But we'll talk about that when we get there. So, Act 2, as we come back, they sort of successfully transport the bomb away, but it explodes mid-transport, wrecking up the runabout. And they are able to barely limp this ship to an L-class world. That means marginally habitable. Quark drops the bomb that it was definitely the Orion Syndicate behind this, and they bicker as the ship crashes. Quark points out that he is not a member of their organization, but before he can finish his line, the ship crashes. And let's get a rundown of their very bleak situation in our next clip. Let me have one line coming out of this.
Actually, it's freezing out there.
Out there? Yeah. Now I remember. You were apologizing for almost getting us both killed.
If that's how you remember it, you must have hit your head harder than I thought you did.
I guess there's nothing we can do now, except send out a distress signal and wait to be rescued.
Good plan. Except we lost the comm system in the explosion.
That's not good.
Gets worse. The replicator's been destroyed. From what I can tell, the local plants are poisonous.
Then I guess we're stuck with food rations.
That's right. One package for you, one package for me. The rest...
I know. Destroyed in the explosion. So now what?
Now we either freeze to death or starve to death. Take your pick.
So there you go. Pretty bleak. And I picked that clip for one thing. I absolutely love that line that Quark gives. That's not good. I don't know why that is so hilarious, but I laughed like crazy hearing him just give that very deadpan kind of response to a weird situation. It's just the comedic currency that he has, that he is so funny that even something that isn't necessarily like a punchline and it's given just as like a straight man way, it's hilarious.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic, and I think the nailing of the tone allows us to go on with some of the things that in other episodes might bother us. Like, for instance, like, I don't know how all food but two gets destroyed in a crash, including like a survival suit. How does that get destroyed in a crash? But you know what? I don't question any of it because it puts them in just the right amount of bleak situation where we know this is going to be a struggle, but it's going to be funny.
Yeah, and they didn't have to make it that bad for him too, because it really does stretch credibility in that they only had these two little packets and they're on this planet for a week or something.
But it lends itself to the farcical nature of this story.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. I don't really mind that.
I mean, my favorite. There's so many good parts of this episode, but you know, my favorite is coming up later when Odo's on fire in this episode too. When the scene that I'm sure we're going to get to, when they're getting ready to leave the runabout. So when he gets the transmitter, it says, "Oh, you decided it wasn't working, so you decided to rip it out of the socket."
Right. Let's get to that plan because, hey, I'm going to basically skip a lot of the B storyline by just simply saying back on the station, the old odd couple routine is in full swing. That's it. I don't care. Now back to our UP2 MVP dream team. Quark has his plan. They can't get their signal from the transmitter out of the atmosphere, but his solution is to lug the big transmitter up that big bastard mountain right outside their window. Commercial break. And it's not a clip because you just can't clip every time these two characters talk to each other, but his carry the one, pie, and then he just points his face up into the mountain.
Actually,
it's great.
You know what made me laugh the most, and it's something like what you said made you laugh in that previous clip was that isn't good. What made me laugh is he does the old finger under the nose thing to move Odo's head up to where
hilarious. Oh, yeah. That's where I laugh too, because he sells it so well, and Odo's just like, what the hell? And then it's great.
Just subtle things like that make me laugh. But you're right, like the carry the 7 times pi, take the square root.
It's the perfect level of just snark.
And it's him. I think it's them lampooning technobabble too, because we always make fun of the technobabble, and he did some ridiculous calculations, and it's like that high.
That, and it's great every time. We see it before when Quark is not letting Odo in on that he is an informant. That's him having something in his back pocket and lording it over Odo. This is another bit of it where he has a plan. Odo is not tech savvy enough. We've seen this before when Quark had to run up and save the ship from a technological thing that Odo was incapable of solving back in season 1 or something like that, right? It's when he can come in and know that he is going to save his butt.
That was Babel when he had to come up to Ops to transport him.
Right. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But whenever he has that, where it's like, stand aside, I know what I'm doing here. It's just a funny, nice little moment because I like it. I don't always. You don't always want to see your characters as bumbling buffoons. You want to see them come through in a pinch and be capable. And Quark is sometimes that, and that Odo rightfully calls it out at a point that he's a failure. And you want to see your guys succeed. And him succeeding in a way you don't necessarily suspect, it's very gratifying.
Yeah, we want to see them succeed, but we want to see them succeed in a situation like this where both of them are completely out of their league with nothing.
And frankly, I mean, we'll cut ahead. What does Odo do in this episode? Oh yeah,
makes a lot of mistakes and breaks his leg.
Yeah. So the hero is not both of these guys. It is well and truly one guy.
Quark.
He comes up with the plan, and then he executes the plan. Granted, he doesn't carry it 100% of the way, but Quark is the absolute. There is no other competitor hero of this episode, and that's funny. I mean, that's a very interesting thing for a guy that was a true scoundrel that made you question whether you could actually like this guy in the very early episodes.
Yeah, I was going to say a guy that we debated whether or not he should even be thrown off the station in the first couple of seasons.
Yeah.
He should have been. I mean, there's no real argument. He should have been. But I think that he also has a heart, and he's shown that through many, many episodes. And Odo realizes it too. You know, you see that a couple of times in this episode.
Yeah, you do.
That he knows it and he sees it, but
I mean, there are little moments that I'll point out later when we get to them, but yeah, you definitely see it. And the thing I like about Quark as his progression through the series goes is that he's pissed, right? That Nog is joining Starfleet, and he mentions about, the Starfleet's corrupting him in this episode. But that being said, I mean, he gets pretty corrupted by the Federation too, by proxy. He doesn't completely lose his Ferenginess, but he starts having more of a conscience than your average Ferengi, I'd say.
Absolutely.
Maybe not Ramen Nog, but then your average.
I'm talking about your average, like
your brunts.
Your brunts, yeah, exactly.
So Act 3, this is where the plot becomes pretty straightforward. Not a whole lot goes on to discuss, so the notes get a little lean. We come back, and they manage to find one survival suit, and they eventually agree to trade off the pants and coat while lugging. And we get some keen insight from Quark, calling out Odo for always wanting to be a human, and his interest in Kira. Odo denies it. Nobody's buying it. Again, some odd couple stuff back on the station to indicate the passage of time on the L-class world. And we come back, it now appears that they've been walking for days. And yeah, it sucked, but they figured that they're almost to the peak. It's clearly just over the next rise. But when they get there, they find it was a false summit, and they realize they are, in fact, nowhere near close enough. They are still days away.
Yeah, I love that. Forget about 6 hours. It's more like 6 days.
Yeah, and funny enough, because, obviously I think one of the inspirations of this episode is like stories like the Alive movie, the Uruguay plane crash in the Andes.
Mm-hmm.
I read about that last night, just one of those Wikipedia holes you go down. And what they had was like described perfectly as like real survivors of mountain crashes, where you cannot get a sense of distance and scale and size. And when you're walking, you swear you're about to come up on top of the mountain, and you get over a little crest and you realize because you're walking uphill, you didn't the real mountain behind it's obscured. So you come up over top of a hill and you realize, oh my God, I am nowhere near where I had all my heart and soul set on getting to, and I'm miles away from it. So this was just like bang on accurate of what it's like surviving with this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that factors into the next scene that I think you have a clip on where Quark is counting the steps because every step down means 2 extra steps up, which that's definitely true.
Absolutely. Let's hear about that, because Act 4, as Matt said, the nerves are starting to get up there. They're frayed in our next clip.
751, 10,752, walk, 10,750, walk. I just want to know how far we're going.
Every step down means an extra step up. Fine. Count to yourself. I don't want to hear it anymore.
Fine. Don't talk to me. It's hard keeping track.
By the time the grand jury gets through with you, you'll be counting years instead of steps.
You know what's going to make all this worthwhile? The look on your face. And let me go.
I'll let you go. I don't think so.
And you call yourself a detective. The Orion Syndicate tried to kill me. They never kill their own. They don't need to. Any one of them would take their own life before testifying against the Syndicate. Don't you get it? I'm not a suspect. I'm a witness. Now you made me lose count.
10,785.
Thank you.
Now let me get this straight. You were never a member of the Orion Syndicate?
I hate to disappoint you.
But you must have tried to join.
I don't want to talk about it.
Now, if I remember correctly, the Orion Syndicate has a membership fee, quite a substantial one, and the Ferengi Commerce Authority did seize all your assets. Oh, it's even worse than that, isn't it? You never could afford to join, could you? All those years of scheming and lying and cheating, and you're still too small time for the Orions. Well, I guess you're not as successful a businessman as you think you are.
Which means you spent the last 10 years of your life trying to catch a nobody with little success, I might add. So you tell me, which one of us is the bigger failure? 10,788. 10,789. 10,790. 10,791.
Yeah, truth hurts there.
Indeed.
That's the thing I like about them in this episode is that they know exactly what to say to hit each other below the belt. It's like, yeah, you're too much of a loser for the Orions, and well, yeah, that means you spent 10 plus years chasing a loser.
Which makes sense, right? Because these two have been at each other since well before this was DS9. We saw that in Things Past, and we kind of knew that even before then. So these guys have been together for 7-10 years. How long has it been? So,
almost 10 years, I think.
Yeah.
So Chris just mentioned Things Past. I wanted to bring that up because, again, we talked about it's interesting with the timing of this episode. It is, again, very interesting that we leave Things Past with the question of, was Odo screwing up investigations leading to the death of more Bajorans? And then we come into this episode, and if you believe the stuff that they're saying, these are very simple things, like the Orion Syndicate never does this. And it should have been easy for him to piece this together, showing that Odo has a lot more bias in his investigations than he would like to admit. So it's curious that they do one episode showing where I hope I didn't do more of this stuff, but I don't know, resulted in people's deaths. And then the next episode shows, no, he's still screwing up with some of this stuff, that he has his inherent biases and these are not perfect investigations. He is prone to these failures. So it's crazy that they give you this dark ending to an episode and then kind of buried in the context of a light episode next to it. It's kind of confirming your worst fears that, yeah, maybe he did allow this to happen a little bit more than you would hope. Interesting. Am I reading into too much of that? It's showing him as flawed in this episode.
Absolutely. This is kind of what I was alluding to earlier when I said this episode even reveals more on the rewatch and is more enjoyable on the rewatch. Because we talked about the glee earlier, but there's also this underlying idea that not only did they ask him to bring Quark and not tell him what he was bringing Quark for, but he assumed automatically that he was bringing Quark to, like, go to jail. That was his automatic assumption because he just doesn't like Quark. I sort of agree with you, Matt, that this does show that he has biases. I think that this was just something where he wasn't investigating it. He just assumed the worst. But that does
But-
speak to his assumptions.
And that's the definition
And
of a
that's a problem,
bias right
right.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't mean this to be like a damning indictment of Odo, but it's curious that you're giving him 2 episodes and one sets up a question and the other one shows that there is some meat to that question.
I mean, but again, flawed characters are the reason I watch this show and like it more than the other Star Trek. So,
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is in no way a criticism.
no,
It's
I know,
just-
I know it's not. I'm just saying, like, this is playing into what I like about the show is that everyone's flawed, no one's perfect.
Right, and it's a bit of nuance that's buried in what you would think is a disposable, purely maybe comedy episode, and that's not exactly what it is. There is some important character revelations and development buried in there.
For sure.
So on the station, let's check in with what was by far the best element of the B storyline.
Yeah.
Rom arrives and he shares a very weird breakfast with Cisco. Nice bit of Cisco acting there where he obviously doesn't want to share a breakfast with him, but he is too polite to say no. And they talk about their kids. And it is simply fantastic where Rom brings up that he is so worried about Nog's quote unquote improved behavior that he actually snuck into his quarters and stole some of his blood, concerned he's a changeling, and he is still walking around with a vial, watching it, waiting for it to turn.
What? How long? It was something like it's been 26 hours. It still looks okay.
Oh, it's just perfect. Again, complete command and control of Ferengi characters.
Mhm.
Just like, I would never have thought of that being the punchline. It makes the whole B storyline worth it to get a 3rd level character to come in and have just like a killer scene with it.
It's also fun on the level of 2 dads discussing their kids and looking at things from the mature perspective and seeing, man, my kid really, because this is something I've noticed with my kids. Like, I notice a lot more quickly the things that I feel like my kid maybe doesn't do that I feel like they should do, or doesn't react the way that I feel like they should react. You know, like there are these little things that my kids do where I'm like, oh man, I wish they hadn't have done that.
Right.
You know? And I'm much more quick to point that out than the good stuff.
Your kids are young. Pretty soon you'll get to the point where Rom and Cisco are dealing with, young men, and they're both like, okay, these kids are driving me nuts. What are we going to do about this?
Well, and the worry. Really, for me, it's the worry aspect. Like, I don't want my kid to be that kid, and whatever that is, right? And so you see both of these parents, and they're sitting at this table, and they're like, man, my kid is that kid. I wish my son was more like this. Maybe not exactly like your kid, but more like this, because I feel like that would be better for him. And so this is so real, because you want the best for your kids. And so when you see them like picking their boogers in the car, and that's a very benign thing, but when you see them picking their boogers in their car, you're just like, come on, I wish you wouldn't pick your boogers. Like, you're not going to be that bigger booger picking kid, are you? And there's so many things like that happen.
Where like your son's a crappy roommate.
Exactly. Yeah. He's just terrible. He's leaving clothes everywhere. Tortured artist.
Man, I mean, we talk about, sometimes I worry we're too praising of Deep Space Nine in general, but people remember this series as the one with the awesome space battles. This is the kind of stuff that's in Deep Space Nine that's in no other Star Trek. 2 dads sitting down and talking about these things that's appealing to Chris. Like, right? Like, where else do you get that in this series of shows?
There's no family stuff in Trek except for, I mean, they try to make Voyager like a family with air quotes.
Not really.
But there's no real family stuff in all of Trek except for this, I feel like. And a little bit with Spock, I guess.
Or human stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that we all love Roddenberry, but he wanted to make it sterile all too often.
I mean, when I think about like family stuff in Trek with the other shows, I think of that one scene in Next Generation where the kid's running away and the guy's like, he's 8 years old. And the father's like, did you finish your calculus homework? I'm like, what the hell? There's Roddenberry for you. We love him, but man, sometimes, I don't know, doesn't make it necessarily the most interesting some ways.
I don't know. I love Roddenberry. I think that we give him a lot of hard time for sterilizing things, but I mean, all these shows were good.
I'm not saying he had great ideas. I just feel like he became too much of an optimist toward the end and drank his own Kool-Aid.
There in the middle of TNG. You're talking about like
At the beginning of
1 and 2,
TNG.
season 1 and 2. I mean, they're in the middle of his run, right? No,
Yeah.
that would have been there.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and also during
anyway.
the movies too, because I mean, if you read some of it, what he wanted to do with the movies after the motion picture, they're just crazy nuts, and they would have been terrible.
Well, studio execs realized that, and they made the right choices, I feel.
I know. I'm just saying that at one point, I mean, he's like George Lucas. The man lost his mind about what we wanted to see.
I would argue that George Lucas never really had much of a mind to lose, and he had good people surrounding him. But that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother podcast. But I said like 4 times. Cut all that out. But yeah, I think that the fatherly moments here, fantastic. It speaks to me on multiple levels, and it gives this episode more of an ethos and a pathos that some of the comedy episodes don't necessarily get. You know, it's all
Right.
schmuck and laughs, and this one has some real life to it, some real feeling, some real ethic, and so I like it.
Yeah, so do I. You're getting all the points that you should out of a good Deep Space Nine episode, and it shows that comedy can still be somewhat substantial and serve a purpose more than just being lighthearted and making you laugh.
But speaking of making you laugh, let's check back in on the L class world. Odo wakes up and slaps the living crap out of Quarter.
That's my favorite part of this whole episode.
He's worried he's dead, but he's not dead. He's just getting worse and worse and going downhill. And like any good Ferengi going downhill health-wise, it always manifests through the ear.
Yeah.
He is now deaf in one of his ears.
Quark checking to see if he's deaf is the biggest laugh I get out of this episode.
Absolutely.
And this is one of the scenes where I just wanted to point out that you could tell for a quick minute when Odo thought that Quark was dead, he was actually really concerned for him. He shakes it off when Quark wakes up and goes back to being annoyed, but you could tell that was genuine worry for a second.
But speaking of genuine, things are getting worse, ratcheting tension like we always talk about. As things continue to go downhill as they climb uphill. Man, look what I did there. They drop some serious truth bombs on each other. Odo calls Quark a failure, and Quark calls Odo a fascist. And they get into a physical tumble. They fall down a hill. Odo is hurt, and oh my God, is his leg crazy Joe Theismann level broken.
Yeah, it is super broken. And I watch a lot of horror movies, so usually like gory stuff doesn't upset me, but like anything like super broken limbs like that always gives me the creeps. Like I still can't watch that one scene in Misery with the hobbling.
Oh yeah. This was good though. And it was the perfect amount of time to be on screen. Just beautiful. So it grossed you out just enough, and then Quark passes out and you laugh a little bit. So
yeah, I was gonna go right into Act 5 because they follow that up with a great punchline, because they point out we come back from commercial break, and apparently during that commercial break, Quark had passed out from looking at the leg too much, and that's just hilarious. And it's even funnier for having not seen it. I would argue, even better.
Yeah, the pratfall would have been a little too much and a little too campy.
We don't really need that. So like I said, we're now in Act 5. A splint is put in place and a stretcher is fashioned. And Quark is going to drag Odo uphill while carrying the transmitter. Eventually, Quark just can't drag all this dead weight anymore. He is totally gassed. He simply cannot go on.
Wait, but you forgot to mention that it's not out of pure love. I love the fact that it's like, I'm not taking you because I'm concerned. I'm taking you for rations. If you die on the way, I'm going to eat you.
Absolutely. Well, again, that's one of those things where there might be truth to that, but just as Odo, this is the mirror scene, I think, of Odo being concerned that Quark died. This is Quark doing the same thing, but justifying it through, a nasty comment to immediately mask them caring about each other.
Though I would have to imagine it would not be out of Quark's character if Odo did somehow die that he wouldn't use him as food.
Oh yeah, he definitely would, but would a Ferengi enjoy that? It's not beetly enough.
Yeah, but this Ferengi's like this is a starving Ferengi, so I mean.
So As Quark is gassed, Odo attempts to rub it in his face by trying to crawl uphill with the transmitter. And this
Oh.
shames Quark into action. He
I
picks
love
it up
how
and
Quark-
carries on alone.
I love how Quark calls it out that you're guilt tripping me.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was, and it worked completely. Again, these two are like a bickering old married couple. They know exactly what to say at the right moment to hurt each other as much as they possibly can, and they know how to make somebody else do something. They know exactly what they're doing and how to manipulate each other.
Yep. And so Quark is going to climb the mountain, and hopefully he'll have much better luck with it than Captain Kirk in Star Trek V.
Yeah. Man, not too many Star Trek V references can be shoehorned in, but there you go.
I need my pain.
Only good thing. On the station, Ben forces the two kids back together, and they just simply learn to chillax. And all is swell. Lessons learned, I guess. Oof. Easy button.
Yeah,
we got an episode to finish up here.
yeah.
Whatever. I mean,
It's
basically,
fine.
right?
It's all right. It's not the best resolution, but you know, it's cool. It's fine. Doesn't make me angry.
But let's wrap up what we really care about. Back on the planet, much more time has now passed. Odo is trying to crawl while still calling out for his bestie Quark. And finally, he gives up and begins to dictate his last will into his communicator. And there is a bit of genuine sadness here because he wishes to be cremated, put into his bucket, and just shot back through the wormhole. Or he says, better yet, and you would have gotten that idea there was kind of depressing and sad enough. I don't know what he was going to say after that, but that was like a genuine kind of like, oh man, this character is still pretty messed up.
I would bet that he would have said, or better yet, take my ashes in my bucket and go back to my people and return it to them, or something like that.
No. He is down in the dumps. He would have said, shoot me back through the wormhole, or better yet, just throw me down the toilet.
Right.
It would have gone that direction.
Yeah,
And-
okay. You're right.
Yeah. Which is, again, that's
Morbid.
pretty sad. Yeah. But before he can finish that, or better yet, just then he is transported away to the Defiant. Odo and Quark are both safe on the ship, and they are made sure to be given beds next to each other to recuperate on their way home. And what will be our final clip?
Before I start the clip, let me just say, let's bid a fun farewell in this episode to the Generations uniforms, because this is their last appearance. We are now in First Contact land from here on forward.
Good point.
Odo, you awake? I am now. We survived. We did. I bet you were surprised. I actually made it all the way to the top. Astounded. You remember back there when I told you I hated you, and you told me you hated me? Vividly. I just wanted you to know. I meant every word of it. So did I.
Worf, Dax, Torres, Paris, Chakotay, 7 and 9, Pish. This is the greatest love affair in all of Star Trek. I mean, it is.
Great ending. I mean, I don't know if I'd say it's the greatest love affair, but
It's one of the
I
greatest
read Imzadi.
pairings.
You didn't read Imzadi, so
I'm not going to be reading Imzadi. I'll read your porn book before I read him.
Oh, I will send you the name of that book when this is over.
I'm not kidding. Please do.
I have read Imzadi, but then I read Imzadi 2. So
It was called Love Triangle. You knew better than to read that one. Imzadi 1 is where you should stop.
Who's the third leg of the triangle in Imzadi 2?
Worf, because they have to address why the Troy and Worf thing broke off after Next Generation ended.
Do they? Do they need to address that?
Apparently, someone thought they did. So, but that's not this episode. Let's go into final thoughts and ratings. So, Chris, start us off. What are your final thoughts and ratings for The Ascent?
Whew. What can I say? I love a good character episode. I think this is good, lighthearted fun, but it also has that good character building that I mentioned in there, and those good moments of pathos and feeling, and those good moments of just ethics and values. So I love this episode. I enjoyed it a lot. I would never ever skip it. I don't think it's a 5-star, but it's certainly more than worthy of 4. Fervishly and feverishly finding friendship for formerly fiery foes and fantastic familiar friends.
And Matt, you're next.
So through the course of this review show, we've talked about the downside of having long seasons where there's a lot of filler crap episodes that you would just wish were taken out, and you would never see that sort of an episode in a tight 13 arc season. But we don't talk about where you have benefits of having these longer seasons, and this is one of those perfect example episodes where you would never get this. If it was Star Trek Discovery, I'm going to bet is not going to have an equivalent type episode like this.
No.
We get little gems where this doesn't necessarily impact the overall story. It gives you nice little character stuff and just really genuinely great comedy kind of elements. And it's delightful when we get these kind of episodes that just fit right in between the important stuff. And this is the kind of stuff you'll lose in a modern TV series. So I can't quite give it 5. I mean, it's really tantalizingly close to it. We didn't talk about it's filmed on location, which is just great. It gives it a whole new interesting quality that you just don't see. They're not just out at that same rock formation out in the desert. This is up in the mountains and just really cool. But that B storyline is just okay. And when it's a third of the episode or whatever it translates out to, when an episode is just okay, I can't give it 5, but it is a solid, very nice 4-star episode. And like Chris said, this is not one to skip. This is a great, solid, fun workhorse episode.
And we are going to be unanimous in our ratings and our feelings, because I feel like even though this isn't the perfect episode, it's so much fun, such character building, in addition to the comedy. And you're right, Matt, this would be the kind of episode that you would lose if we're doing 13 episode seasons. And, it shows that that's kind of a double-edged sword. But the thing is, I find that usually these filler episodes aren't written as good as some of the filler episodes here on DS9. I struggle to think of a lot of filler that's as good as some of this stuff than on the other series, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that this is a great episode. Don't skip it. You'll have fun. You'll have genuine emotion, and it's just a really cool episode. So I'm also going to give it 4 stars. And thank you so much for all your feedback. We really do love hearing from you. There are a number of ways to get a hold of us. You can reach us through email at up2podcast@gmail.com. Leave a comment in our forums at forum.checkmatefamily.com. Follow us on Twitter at UP2podcast, and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/overpylon2. Also, 5-star iTunes reviews really help out the show and get the word out there about how we're doing, and let other people know that we exist. And so we really thank you for those reviews as well. Also, too, you can reach us personally on Twitter. I am at mhansen0207, HANSEN, talking about all things nerdy, Star Trek, Star Wars, Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think this episode comes out after this episode will come out after the new Spider-Man has come out, so I'll probably be talking a lot about that on Twitter. So if you want to talk about any of those things and much, much more, find me there.
I can be found at Pro Sub-Zero, where I simply can't get out to the movies anymore, what with a baby and all, but I sit at home and read a lot of old science fiction books, just paperback, weird crap from the 50s and 60s, and love every bit of it and tweet about it. Pro Sub-Zero. Chris, where can we find you talking about your drunken love of the Golden Girls?
I am back on Twitter, actually, in multiple facets. I am on Twitter talking about wrestling. I'm on Twitter talking about Pokemon. I'm on Twitter talking about Golden Girls like once every week, where I drunkenly tweet under the hashtag SaucyGG. That's SAUCYGG. You can follow that conversation because nobody else uses that hashtag. Yeah, that's what I do on Twitter at Carnivore J. It's tons of fun.
It's been great fun watching that, and
look forward to his review of Great Balls of Fire coming up.
I got next Sunday off. Y'all got Dan on deck, so I'm gonna be definitely talking about that on Twitter.
And speaking of next week, thank you so much for joining us for this fun little chat on the Ascent. Next week, we move into new uniforms and back to seriousness and prophecies and all that stuff where we talk about Rapture.
Oh, Blair's not here, so I'm first. This is it's one of the blessings of old friends that you can afford to be stupid with them. And this is Chris in South Carolina.
Are we supposed to be flying this close to the mountains? I'm Matt in Buffalo.
And this is Matt from Arizona, closing hailing frequencies. Docking clamps are open and you are cleared for departure.